All right, check, radio check. Want to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to hop in, see us, and some of you may realize that I have a different background behind me. I am currently in the Poconos at my in-laws, doing our weekly chat with Chris from here. And the topic that I picked for this week, a couple of weeks ago, I had somebody reach out to me and we started having a discussion of, paying for cars. And if you've ever worked with me as far as, forecasting future expenses, one of the things that I think, I try and put into context is that, how often are we buying a car? How many miles? And then what are we budgeting for a car? So if we're going to use somebody might be very proud and say, hey, I have no car payment, I pay cash for my car. Okay, that's not neither good or bad, it just is. But when I'm forecasting future needs of for expenses, I either have to take it from one of two pockets. I'm either going to take it from cash flow, or I'm going to take it from one of the assets that we have on our record. So what I'd like to do today is take us through some conversations, just some thought processes. A lot of us already think we know and understand the financing aspects of the cars. I'll talk about that a little bit, but I want to bring some insight into, is paying cash the best option, or is there anything else we can do? So without further ado, step one, should I pay cash for my car or lease it, right? And well, that depends. And remember, part of our philosophy of professional planning services is you have to plan with the end in mind. And so, regardless of what your intentions are, and your household's different than the household or your neighbors next to you, I always try and say, hey, let's plan with the end in mind. Let's sort of have a roadmap as to where we're trying to get to. So if that's the case, if we're planning with the end in mind, what we want to do first is define the purpose of the vehicle. Is this vehicle going to be a commuting vehicle, getting to and from the office? Is it going to be just running errands or nearby? Maybe we want a backup car. Maybe it's a work truck, right? And then once we determine the purpose of the vehicle, then we can start to determine, the length of the need versus the want. So, in our younger years, I'll speak for myself. I was very attracted to my first car was a tank. It was a beater. It was a battle cruiser, is what we used to call it. And I could make mistakes with it because as long as I didn't hurt anybody, there wasn't a lot of damage that could happen to the car. But then my dad helped me with the first car I got, and it was a Trans Am, and I loved that car, and it was fast, and it was furious, and it was cool, and I blew an engine in it, and I found out the hard way. Walking, is still an efficient manner to get to and fro. So, as I've gone through the years, I've not only helped myself figure out how to purchase vehicles and how the system works, but I've actually helped many clients that have reached out to me, and I've negotiated on their behalf, at request. So the question becomes, do we pay cash? Do we finance it? Or maybe an option is leasing. For some people, the approach of buying a car is like the approach of marriage, till death do us part. Others prefer to keep their options open, trading in every few years for the latest make and model and the most cutting edge technology or the highest horsepower. Whichever describes you best, we all face a similar decision when it comes to acquiring a car: finance, lease, or pay cash. So consider this. And, again, a lot of you may or may not know, but it's in my bio on LinkedIn and on my website. But I am a master mentor with Circle of Wealth, and we will integrate some tools and conversations through some of the financial decisions we face in life. And one of those decisions that is often overlooked by people is something called opportunity cost. And I like this picture because it's actually opportunity loss. If you pay cash, you may or may not have, you may have no payments, but you lose the rate of return that could have been earned on an investment. This is called loss opportunity cost. So I'd like to take us through some conversations, which is another factor in the asset when we're thinking about it, is depreciation, right? So we all know that if I pay X amount off the lot for a car, as soon as those wheels hit the pavement off the lot, it's lost value. So that's depreciation. Now, some of it's tax deductible, depending on if you have a business and we can write it through that. And oftentimes it's not. But when we go to try and resell it, depending on the care that we take, is a factor as well. But you still have a cost, whether you pay cash or finance. And this is one of the areas where I find, once I present it to people, people are like, ah, hadn't thought of it that way. So let me take you through this conversation. So we have three types of folks that we deal with. And ultimately, you're either a spender, you're a saver, and what we ultimately try and teach people is how to become a wealth creator. So let's talk about the spender. The spender will turn around and they don't have the money right now to buy the car. So what they'll do is they'll go ahead and take that car and they'll finance it. And notice that over here we have these red lines, right? So these dictate on the zero line is we started with zero. We went into debt initially, and then over 5 years, we solely got that car back to zero. And now we have that paid off, but we went into debt to do it. But notice that every 5 years, this is happening again and again. So this is how somebody that doesn't and hasn't saved the capital typically buys a vehicle. Now, the other side of the equation is somebody that is willing to forego the immediate gratification of a car purchase, and they'll save that money over a period of time. And then after the 5 years, then they'll buy the car. But notice when they do that, that they go back to the zero line. So there is a cost either way, right? Because while that car goes back to zero and they didn't have interest payments on the car, they still have to take and budget that money apart to put it in for the next vehicle purchase. And this is why when I'm working with folks and we're doing, financial retirement plans, I'll budget in a cash flow so that whether we're paying a car payment or whether we're saving for a future capital purchase, we've accounted for it. But ultimately, the secret sauce, if I can teach folks and I have enough time, it's the wealth creator. In essence, what we're creating is a private equity or a fund of cash that we can tap into where we don't interrupt compounding. So that's a really unique strategy. You got to qualify to do it. But what happens over time is now you become your own bank. The only person you have to ask for permission is yourself. I have a client right now that is getting their borrowing money from their contract, and they will turn around and have that funds in 7 to 10 days. But the actual cash value inside that contract is still earning and growing a rate of return. So now we have two horses in the race where we have our money continuing to grow and compound while we'll simultaneously have an asset. And if we can preserve that asset, then it could make money. In this case, it's a car, but this also applies for real estate as well. So step two, research the best price before any financing discussion. So there are a lot of sources out there that can help you to do that. You have US News World Report, you have JD Power, Edmunds, you have Kelley Blue Book, Consumer Reports, TrueCar. Any of these things, what you want to always try and do before you go and step on a lot, any place to buy a vehicle, finance a vehicle, always put yourself in a cash buyer mindset. So that when you walk in, you say because what will the salesperson in a dealership try and do? They'll say, hey, let me sit down for a couple minutes. What are you looking at? Let me work up some numbers for you. And they always present their information in a monthly time frame. What we try and do is say, hey, save all that conversation for a later date. What I want to know right now, if I give you cash, what is the best deal you can give me? And that's really important. So once the price is established, explore whether financing or leasing makes sense. And that's step three. So the choice between buying and leasing a car is often a tough call. On the one hand, buying involves higher monthly costs, but you own an asset, your vehicle in the end, right? On the other hand, a lease has lower monthly payments. It lets you drive a vehicle that you may be more expensive than you could afford to buy, but you get into a cycle in which which you will never stop paying for the vehicle. That's an important point when I'm talking to folks, because you know what? I've leased cars before. I've also owned cars. Now, because I own a business, quite often I'll use a lease because I prefer to write it off as a business expense as much as possible. But you may not be in a situation where you can actually do that. And remember, if you don't take care of that vehicle along the way when you go to turn it in, you're going to be assessed some penalties, or maybe not get the current fair market value of the vehicle when you go to trade it in. And what they do, because these car dealerships are slick and they're business owners as well, what they're going to turn around and do is shortchange you on the trade-in, sell you the new car, and that's something called capitalization costs, and they're going to not give you top dollar on the residual value of your trade-in. What they do is roll that into the new payment, and so it can be perpetual, and so you have to be cautious when you do that. So financing a new car requires a smaller initial outlay of money, usually 20% or more of the vehicle's value in the form of a down payment. When you drive off the lot, the bank owns the car, not you. As with most loans, you make monthly payments of principal and interest with the promise of eventual ownership. The amount of the payments depends on a variety of factors, including the value of the car, the length of the loan, and the interest rate offered by the lender. Car dealers sometimes will offer no money down or low percentage rate loans, which can make financing more manageable. So owning a car, obviously owning an asset, you can step into it, but understand you A, might have to part with some cash up front, and B, at the end of the day, your payments will probably be more than leasing. So let's talk about leasing. If you like a new car every few years, and there's advantages to leasing into to upgrading to cars every few years. It's what we call planned obsolescence, or technological upgrades. I was looking at some new Dodges recently, and because I have a Dodge, and as I was looking at it, some of the technology that's been integrated even over the last 3 years, it's amazing how quickly cars are upgrading, and the technology that's, I had to drive out to Hershey yesterday to see a client. And as I was coming back, I'll be honest, I was running low on gas. It was torrential, some of the worst driving I've done in a long time. I'm on the road, these tractor trailers, you can't see. I didn't want to stop for gas. And I'm watching it, but I have that echo feature which drops out 4 cylinders when you're coasting to allow me to get behind a tractor trailer and just coast. And I made it to the gas station probably with about 2 to 3 miles to spare. I don't recommend doing that, but just keep that in mind, that the technology, had it not been there back when I had my Trans Am or my battle cruiser, I could guarantee you I spent some times on the side of the road because I ran out of gas. You learn some things as you get older, and I try not to be in that situation anymore, but because of the weather and because of timing and where I was, I felt I could make it, and I did. So back to where we were. You pay a monthly fee to use the car for a specific amount of time, usually 3 to 4 years. Monthly payments are typically lower, and this is the attractive feature where they bait you with that monthly payment, but you got to read the fine print. You got to say how many miles are going to be included every year. What's the residual cost that you're going to give me a trade in? Are we doing this a lease for 36 months, 48 months? What's the max they will go? Because they might go out 5 years, but what's the car going to be worth in 5 years? And how much are they going to give you on a trade in, as I referenced before? So when you finance, since you are paying for the depreciation on the car while you drive it, and that's where they really that's the part that it's hard to internalize, that, hey, listen, this car is losing value as you're driving it while you lease. In certain situations, lease payments may also have tax considerations. Like I said, if you're a business owner and you have bona fide expenses, it can be, but there's really strict rules to be able to do so. So you just can't say, oh, I'm going to go lease and I have some abstract business. No, you have to keep very accurate records. However, there are caveats to leasing. For one, a lease typically stipulates the number of miles permitted to drive during the course of the lease. At the end of the lease, you may face penalties if you've exceeded the total number of miles in the contract or excessive wear and tear. And that's a key one. So lastly, we're going to talk about, just sort of, the federal government has chimed in as well. The monthly payments on the lease are usually lower than monthly finance payments. If you bought the same car, with the lease, you're paying to drive the car, not to buy it. That means you're paying for the car's expected depreciation or loss of value during the lease period, plus a rent charge, taxes, and fees. Bottom line is there's a lot of hidden costs and fees within the lease agreement. And if you go into it with your eyes open and you understand it, great. But a lot of people get the deer in the headlight look. Their eyes gloss over. They just start signing papers, no idea what they're signing. And at the end of the day, it's not right now. They're not going to get you today. But when you go and turn around and return that car, they're going to go, oh, we're sorry, but you violated the terms of the agreement. So step four, take care of your investment. And that's how I would view a vehicle, right? It is truly an investment because like I said, like anything, it will be worth something if you hold value. And I'm not talking collector's items. I'm just talking about trade-ins. So regular maintenance, that means servicing, recalls, or oil changes, keeping the miles low within the terms of the agreement. But even if you don't lease it and you want to have a car that's going to have resale value, you want to keep the miles off the car. That's the first thing we look at when we go to look at it. We're looking at the wear and tear of the vehicle as well as the mileage. If you have a garage, you have that ability, keeping it indoors and out of the elements, obviously that's going to help prolong and help booster the future value. Watch where you park, right? So, my wife gets aggravated when we go somewhere because I will park at the farthest part of the parking lot and we'll all walk. And my answer is always, hey, listen, the exercise can't hurt us. But in truth, what happens is most people are so inconsiderate, or maybe they don't really care about their car, or they're using somebody else's car, or it's a rental car. And these spaces are so tight that they go in and people just open their door, they ding your doors. And later on, when you go to trade that vehicle back in or to sell it in the future or turn it back in on the lease, that they ding you for those blemishes. So just, these little habits that you can create will help you to prolong the value of your vehicle. I'm not here to preach to people. Smoking, obviously, years and years of study, we know is bad for a health perspective. But from a resale value, if you've ever been into a car where somebody smokes, that's one of the things. They're going to just take money off the top because nobody wants to step into that vehicle with that odor lingering, and the dealerships will account for that as well. Care of road hazards. And again, as I mentioned, I was on the road yesterday. I can't tell you how many cars I saw flipped over. I was going slow, but I turned around and the road hazards that were also in the middle of the road with the wind blowing, body truck parts in the middle of the road, car parts in the middle of the road. And you hit it. So even though it might not do any damage to the outside of the body, it could do some damage to the undercarriage and things like that. So it could cause you some problems down the road from servicing or maintenance standpoint as well. And then lastly, tire maintenance. It's one of those things where nobody wants to spend money on tires. Nobody, they're expensive. You typically got to go to a qualified service center to get your car tires, the air pressure maintained and that they're balanced so that they don't throw off the camber on your steering, so you don't have the speed wobbles. All these things help to preserve the longevity of your car. Now, I know everybody on this car, you go, well, duh, I already know this stuff. But sometimes we get so caught up emotionally that we're looking at a vehicle like, isn't it? I wish my car could always look like it did on the showroom floor. And I think we've all sort of had or gravitated towards those thoughts. And with a little bit of attention to some of these things that I mentioned, not only can you negotiate a good deal, not only can this vehicle, depending on how we finance it now and into the future, whether we start to self-finance it, and let's talk about that. If you turn around and go back to what we were teaching about the wealth creator, when you're buying your car and you own it, it's amazing the sentiment of how you want to protect it versus when you go rent a car. My son and I, when he was learning to drive a manual, I rented a car that was a stick shift so he could learn how to drive a manual car on somebody else's vehicle. You don't treat a rented car necessarily as well as you would something that you're personally responsible for. So these are just tips that I've learned over my years of my career. Just trying to share some words of wisdom with you. If it helps, great. This will be recorded, so please, if you know somebody in your family that has this question, this wasn't intended to be get into the weeds of a capitalization and residual and fees and expenses and go through an application. Although if you do find yourself in that position and you do have questions, please reach out to us. I'm happy to help. So lastly, we have some Social Security classes coming up, Rutgers Business School. They're coming up April 20th and 27th. If you're close to or been thinking about collecting Social Security, you got questions, please reach out. We're happy to answer and help you to integrate that into your overall retirement plan. Lastly, this is our disclaimer. So I want to thank everybody for taking time out of your busy schedules, continuing to support us. And a happy belated Easter. And if we can help you in any way, please reach out.